If you've ever tried budgeting and felt maybe overwhelmed, stressed even, or like you needed a finance degree just to survive, you're not alone. But what if managing your money was as easy as answering one simple question with three choices: need, want, or savings? That's it. Stick around because today I am giving you the simplest, most realistic budget you will ever use. And if you can master this, you can master your financial future. So let's jump into the simplest budget ever. Let's go.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror. Where future success is reflected in our knowledge of fixing the one thing we can control, ourselves.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror, and thanks for joining me today as we continue to work to improve the one thing that we can control, ourselves. Here at the Financial Mirror, it is not about the numbers and spreadsheets alone, but about transforming and educating you on money so that you can make smarter financial decisions. If this is the first time you're joining in, don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube to be notified of all the new episodes as they release. If you're listening on Rumble, don't forget to follow the channel and like the video. And on any podcast platform of your choice, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. So imagine this. Imagine if managing your money came down to this one question: is this a need? Is this a want? Or is this a savings? And this could be an investment. This could be actual savings account, or this could be paying off debt. That's it. No complex spreadsheets, no tracking of all these various categories, just a simple question with only three choices. In today's episode, I am handing you the simplest, most effective budgeting method that anyone can stick to. Super simple. Plus, if you're dealing with debt, I'm going to show you exactly how to adjust this rule to crush your debt faster without starving your life of joy. Okay? It's going to be an easy plan, super easy to follow, super easy to implement. And even when you come out of debt, you will be on track and ready to take on whatever your financial future holds, still using the same budget. So stick around because budgeting doesn't have to be terrible. It can actually be freeing. So the first thing that I want to start with is just describing what this budgeting, this miraculous, this magic pill of budgeting is. It's not new. It's not a new concept. I didn't come up with it. But what I'm hoping to do in this episode is really just explain it in a way that you can figure out how to directly apply this to your life to fix the budgeting heartaches, right? Because many people don't budget because it's hard, it's complicated, they don't want to know where their money's going, all these different reasons. And I've talked about it in nauseam, and I just want to really make this simple, easy to use. So 50, 30, 20, what is it? Well, really and truthfully, it's super simple, right? It's you take your take-home pay, and 50% of your take-home pay goes to needs. So think of this like your survival essentials. 30% goes to wants, which is like your fun or lifestyle upgrades, and 20% goes to savings/debt. That's your emergency fund, retirement, debt payoff. All those things are all in that bucket. Now, it's intuitive. It's flexible, it's sustainable, it's easy. And you know what the best part is you don't need to track every little thing. When I work with clients, the biggest headache that I get when it comes to, and it's not really my headache, I'm used to it, but their headache when they're looking at their budget is, well, is this fast food or restaurants? And man, like you want to talk about just stumping someone is Chick-fil-A a restaurant or is it fast food? Well, it could be a restaurant if I dined in and sat there. It could be fast food if I went through the drive-through. Like it will stump people. Like just that. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, just make a choice. Like both of those can be right. Like you're not wrong on either of those selections. So what I normally do is have people roll it up and just say, let's just call it food. And that can be your groceries, your fast food, and your restaurants, right? Like, but those type of questions stump people because they want to be right. They want to be knowledgeable. They want to make sure that their budget is reflective of where they're actually spending their money. And if you choose the wrong category, yeah, bad data in, bad data out. But let's create a way that maybe takes away that headache, right? And that's where this 50, 30, 20 is, right? Because you're going to ask yourself, when you spend money, is this a need, like survival essential? Is this a want, like fun? Or is this a savings? And that one's probably the easiest. The need and the want is where you're going to get hung up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But the biggest thing is that you have that simple question, like, what is it? And I have three answer choices. I have three choices. One is kind of self-evident, the savings / debt. The need and the want become a little, on some of the items, they can become a little choosy. Okay. So the best thing that you can do when you're in that moment and you're answering this question is trust your gut. Label it and move on. Label it and move on, right? Because just like in budgeting, if I overspend in food, I have to take from somewhere else. If I overspend in wants, I have to take from somewhere else. If my debt exceeds how much 20% is, I have to take from my wants, right? Like you have that balance that happens in the 50, 30, 20. Like some months, you may overspend in wants and be at 40%. Well, where does that come from? Well, potentially your future, right? Because it may have to come from savings, or maybe you didn't have to spend as much in needs. So you can come from there. I say that hesitantly because, if it's a need, it's a survival essential, which means maybe your power bill was cheaper that month, so you're able to take away. But anyways, we'll get to it. We'll kind of dive into it. But all of this is based on after-tax income, not gross, after-tax income. Actually, how much money hits your account is what this is based on. There's no right or wrong. Your needs and your wants are personal. Like what you consider a need may not be what I consider a need. What you consider a want may not be what I consider a want. So you got to have some flexibility, and that's key, because if you're going to stick to these percentages, you've got to stick to percentages, not perfection. Okay. Percentages, not perfection. That's what it's all about. So how does this work? So here's how you can start today. Super easy, step by step, how you can start today. We're going to do 4 steps here, just walking through, and I'm going to give you some outlines after this quick overview of how you can get through needs versus wants, debt, so forth and so on. So how it works. Step 1 is you've got to figure out what your after-tax monthly income is. Probably the easiest way to do this, if I'm honest, you could go pull pay stubs and all that, sure. But what you could do is just open up your checking account that your income is deposited into and add it up. Pull it for last month, see how much you made. Maybe pull it for the last 3 months and get an average here. That'll help you with your budgeting. But overall, just pull in. Sorry, I took a drink of water. Overall, just pull in your after-tax monthly income, see what it is, and that's what your starting point is, right? So that's step 1. You're done with step 1. Step 2 is we start with 50%, 30%, and 20%. So for example, let's say that you make $4,000 a month. Well, 50%, half of that is $2,000. So $2,000 is going to be your needs fund. $1,200 is going to be your wants fund. That's 30%. $800 is going to be your savings / debt. Okay. We're going to get into the differences because needs and wants, savings and debt, those are kind of the two like sub buckets, but I don't want to overcomplicate this yet because the whole idea is that this is simple. So 50%, 30%, 20%. So $4,000 income, 20% to needs, or excuse me, 50% to needs, which is $2,000, 30% to wants, which is $1,200 in this case, 30% of $4,000, 20% of $4,000 is $800. So that's that savings / debt. Now, the whole idea is you don't need 17 subcategories. All you need is these 3 buckets. Okay. Just make sure you're living inside those buckets. Track your spending. That's it. That's step 3. Track your spending. That is step 3. Now, the biggest thing, and this is what we're going to go into next, but the biggest thing is that you just have to ask yourself on every transaction, is this a need? Is this a want? Or is this a saving/debt? And then mark it and you're done. That's it. Mark it and you're done and that's it. Now, some things you can do to help with that is just have pre-populated list of what you consider a need. But even that is potentially not necessary, because if you think, trusting your gut, this is something I needed, like I had to have this to survive, right? That like if you didn't get a new pair of shoes, like but you have 15 other pairs of shoes, that's not a survival item. You've got 15 others. The 16th didn't really matter. But if you had no pairs of shoes and you're going to be walking barefoot, those shoes may be a need. Okay. So just kind of thinking that, but track your spending through those 3 buckets. And step 4 is automate your savings. So pay yourself that, whatever your savings amount is, pay yourself that. Now, remember that in this percentage, this 20%, if you're doing 401k contributions and things like that, I'm going to tell you there's 2 ways to approach that. If you're providing it to a like a Roth IRA after it hits your account, that's one thing that goes into your savings, right? Because that is directly coming out of your take-home pay. If you're using a 401k, like a traditional 401k, personally, I would just that's just free chicken, right? I would just let that still be a percent of my investment, and not take it into my 20% savings personally. You could though. You could go look at how much that is and say, you know what, if I had 800 in savings, but I deposited 100 into my 401k, I'm now only going to do $700 in savings, right? I mean, you could do that. But you have to also increase your, I would go the other way. I would say $800 in savings, but my take home may be $4,100, right? Because it was pre-tax. I wouldn't overcomplicate it. I would say if I bring home $4,000, 20% is going to savings. If I'm still doing 401k, free chicken, let it be saved, right? That's how I'm doing it. I'm not complicating this. So anyways, income times 0.5% or 0.5 is your needs. Income times 0.3 is your wants. Income times 0.2 is your savings. Okay. Even like just that quick budget as a starting point is life-changing. You will absolutely be on your path to success if you just do that. Okay. Now, what if you're in that like question and of saying, is this need, want, or savings? And you're just not sure? Because what I would tell you is it's really up to you. And as long as you're consistent, it'll make this easier. Okay. Every time you reach for your wallet, I would ask myself at time of purchase, what is my gut telling me? When that shows up in my budget, I should already know what I'm marking it as. All I should just be doing is waiting and then being able to balance. When I pull out my wallet and I go to buy this stuff, I should be saying, is this a need, a want, or savings? And if I'm buying new tires for my car so I can get to work, that is a need. However, if I'm buying new tires because I want these brand new all-terrain tires and the tires I had before were just fine, that is a want, right? You see how we just created 2 new scenarios for tires? Like you still had 20,000 more miles on the tires you had, but you wanted these brand new all-terrain tires. So that becomes a want. Like you don't need that. So it's a want. That's how you have to remember this. Is this survival or is this not? But if you can answer that question, you will be good to go. So let's play like a quick round of just going through a couple of these items so that you can kind of think through it. Groceries, right? If you're buying groceries, that's a need. It's a survival item. This one, even if you're like, well, do I need that box of cereal versus not needing that box? Listen, if you get to that point, like this is your only option for budgeting because category way was going to be way more of a headache. So is it groceries? It's a need. Just call it a need. Streaming service. I know it can feel like a need, but it's a want. right? Streaming services, wants. Roth IRA contributions, savings, right? See how we just did that real quick. Here's a pro tip. If you lost your job tomorrow, would you still have to pay for it? Like, if you lost your job tomorrow, would this be something that you would have to be really trying to figure out how to pay for it? If that's a yes, it's a need. If that's a no, like I could go cancel it, I could go get rid of it, I could go do away with it, and I would not have to pay for that anymore, it's a want. Don't overthink about it, or don't overthink it. Don't justify things. Just label it and move on. Label it at time of purchase and move on. Cool? That's the easiest way. Your needs and your wants might look different from someone else's. That's totally fine. Totally fine. Okay? Just making that clear. But that's all you're trying to do. Now, what if you're in debt? This is important. If you are in debt, you have to adjust the labeling of your 50, 30, 20, and there's a chance you have to adjust the percentages. Okay. So if you're in debt, your 20% savings bucket isn't for saving. It's for getting out of your debt, right? Step one is to get a $1,000 emergency fund. So use that 20% for savings to get to $1,000 in an emergency fund. After that, you're using that entire 20% for your debt. Okay. Your 20% first covers minimum debt payments. Then any extra of the 20% goes toward extra payments on your debt. Utilize something like a debt snowball or debt avalanche to pay off the debt. Use that as your plan, but use the entire 20% of your pay to go towards debt completely. If 20% covers all minimum payments, but not much left over, now we got to go to step 3. If your 20% isn't enough to cover minimum payments plus a cushion to start paying off your debt, right? You can't pay minimum payments forever. You need a small cushion there. You've got to dip into your wants, right? So you may end up with your 30% is debt and 20% is wants. You may have a 50, 30, 20 still, but you may have to flip your savings or your debt savings bucket, which is normally 20%. You may have to make extra 30% and make your wants your 20. If that's still not enough, you may be doing like a 50, 40, 10 split, right? 50% needs, 40% debt, 10% wants, right? It maybe that's not what you need, but you're just like, I just want to get out of debt fast. Do like a 50, 40, 10, or change your 50, 30, 20 to where 30% is going toward debt. All in all, the idea here is that you need enough inside of this to pay off your debt. Pay minimum payments plus the cushion. And that's it. Cut back the fund money temporarily, but don't starve yourself of those survival expenses. Those 50% needs to stay 50%. You don't need to lose in your mortgage. You don't need to lose in your rent, groceries, gas to get to work, to make the income, like all those type of things. You've got to keep that strong, okay? So debt is an emergency. Wants are optional. So you've got to crush the debt so that you can start to get your freedom back with your money, okay? So remember, if your take home is 40%, if your take home is 4,000, your savings bucket is 800. If your minimum debt payments is 600, you still have 200 to do snowball, which is great, right? It's pretty good. But if your minimum debt payments are 1,000 overall, you've got to take a lot from your wants, right? You've got to take a lot from your wants. So let's kind of go through it as an example. If your savings bucket is 800, but your minimum payment is 800, but you still want to keep that $200 cushion, you need $1,000 for your debt payments, right? So you're going to have to change that percentage so that you have $1,000, okay? It's crucial. It's crucial, all right? It's crucial. So you'll be at a 25% versus a 20%, okay? So hopefully you get that. Hopefully that all makes sense. That is how 50, 30, 20 works. But needs versus wants, just want to kind of run through those, just give you some ideas on where to start. Hopefully you got the idea of how to lay the budget out. Just give you some ideas as some starting points. Examples of some needs are things like rent and mortgage, groceries, utilities, insurance, whether auto insurance, health insurance, all those items. All of those things are needs, all right? Wants are things like travel, hobbies, subscription services. You could really throw in there dining out as being a want, but I'll kind of let you play that. Like I said, everybody's is different. Do you want to consider dining out a need? That's fine. It just still needs to meet sit inside that 50%, right? It's fine. I'm not telling you not to include dining out. What I'm telling you is that it just still needs to be, you don't need to overspend in that. And dining out can lead to overspending very quickly. So put it in needs if you would like, but just don't go over the 50%. All right. But those are some ideas around wants. And then some of those savings examples is building emergency funds, retirement contributions. If you're in debt, you're paying off debt. So extra money to pay off debt faster. Those type of items, right? And that is kind of a basic outline for that. But the idea behind this is that you are the boss of your own life. Your needs, your wants, your savings should reflect your priorities, not anyone else's. So how your 50-30-20 looks is going to be different than how someone else's 50-30-20 looks. But the idea here is that you're in control. You're in control. When the items come in, all you're doing is asking yourself, or when you're spending, right? I prefer people to do it when they're spending it so that it's already like pre-programmed. Like when this comes in, it's not going to be a gut check because kind of getting on a tangent here, but what a lot of people do with a 50-30-20 is they'll see where they have a little money, and then they'll put it in there. So kind of tell yourself, get that gut check up front as a want. But the idea here is that your life is not the same as anyone else's. What you consider a need, maybe not considered a need for someone else. That's fine. But just ask yourself, hey, is this a need, a want, or a savings / debt? And choose it. Rock and roll. Super easy, right? Super easy. So, listen, budgeting is not about punishment. And so many people don't budget because they feel like budgeting is restrictive. And it's not. It actually is the complete opposite. It's giving yourself permission to spend on what matters, to save for your future dreams, to build financial freedom. All of these things is what a budget's intended to do. It's intended to put guardrails around your spending. I'm sorry to tell you this, and maybe this is a wake-up call, but if you make $4,000 and you spend $5,000 every month, a budget's going to save your life. Because if you're overspending $1,000 every month, you are headed down a financial nightmare. It really is. It's a financial nightmare. The problem is that most people use budgeting and they equate budgeting to being restrictive. And they say, well, I'll spend my money until my checking account's empty, right? What's the problem with that? What's the problem? There's no forecasting. There's no looking ahead to say, like, am I going to have enough to pay for my needs? Because then all of a sudden I spent what was in my account and then that need comes in, right? That's a survival item. It's a survival expense and you need to pay it. So what do? You resort to debt to do so. So it's not restrictive. It's not restrictive. It's not complicated. Here, this is a fine example. It's not complicated. 50-30-20. One question, 3 choices, right? Ask yourself, throw it in its bucket, move on. Stick to the 50-30-20 rule. Trust your gut when labeling needs, wants, and savings. Crush your debt if you have it, right? That's your first priority if you have it. But most importantly, stay consistent. Be consistent, not perfect. Sometimes you may put something into a want that could have been a need. You may put something into a need that probably should have been a want. The idea is to be consistent. Figure out, the longer you do this, the easier it gets. The longer you do it, you may start wanting to be a little bit more conscious of this specific category you're looking at. But the idea here is to start with this basic concept, super easy to use, and go and reach your financial goal. So if you found this helpful, hit that like button, hit that subscribe for some more simple money tips in the future. Share this with anyone who is just tired of confusing budgets. This is the simplest way to attack this. So appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you listening if you're on a podcast, and look forward to next week. Continue improving the one thing you can control, yourself. Peace.
Well, that wraps up today's Financial Mirror. Join us next week as we continue to work on ourselves, change our mentality, and to commit to achieving the success we always envisioned. Regardless of your platform, help us grow as a community. Please like, subscribe, and share with the people in your lives.